The velvet of the box is cold against my fingertips. It's supposed to be heavy, not with the physical weight of gold and diamond, but with the gravity of 12 years. 12 years of shared breakfasts and silent arguments, of holding hands in the dark during scary movies, of promises whispered into the curve of a neck. But tonight, it's just a box. Light. Empty. Hollowed out, just like the space in my chest where my heart used to beat with a steady, trusting rhythm. I lift the lid again, as if the sheer force of my disbelief could conjure the ring back into its small, cushioned throne. Nothing. The indentation in the velvet is a perfect, mocking circle. A ghost of what was there this morning. He took it. The thought doesn't crash into me like a wave. It seeps in like a slow, rising tide of ice water. He actually did it. He walked into our bedroom, into this room filled with a decade of our life, opened my jewelry box, and took the one thing he swore was the symbol of forever. He took it for her. My breath catches a sharp, ragged thing. The air in the room is suddenly thick, unbreathable. I can smell his cologne lingering on the pillow next to mine, a scent that used to mean safety, home. Now it smells like betrayal, like a lie I'd been breathing in for months, without even knowing it. I close the box. The soft click echoes in the silence of the house, a sound as final as a door slamming shut on a life I no longer recognize. He didn't just steal a ring. He stole our past. He stole my future. And he thinks he got away with it. He thinks I'm just the quiet, unassuming wife who will weep into her pillow and eventually, quietly, disappear. He has no idea who he's dealing with. Not anymore. He thinks the game is over. But I'm the one who just placed the final, definitive checkmate. And he doesn't even see it coming. If you've ever felt that cold, sinking feeling of betrayal, that moment where the world tilts on its axis and nothing makes sense anymore, tell me about it in the comments. I read every single one. And if you're new here, please subscribe. Knowing you're out there listening helps more than you can possibly imagine. 12 years ago, this house was just a frame of raw timber against a blue sky. I remember standing with Mark on the dirt plot, a blueprint clutched in my hand, the wind whipping my hair across my face. He'd wrapped his arms around me from behind, his chin resting on my shoulder. "I can see it, Ames," he'd murmured, his voice full of that boundless, infectious optimism that made me fall in love with him. The kitchen window right there, catching the morning sun. Our bedroom over here. A tire swing on that old oak for the kids will have. He painted a picture so vivid, so beautiful, I could almost smell the fresh paint and hear the laughter of children who didn't exist yet. We built this house from the ground up, nail by nail, argument by argument, dream by dream. Every wall holds a memory. The scuff mark by the back door is from the day we brought home our golden retriever puppy, Gus, who skidded right into the wall in his excitement. The faint water stain on the ceiling of the guest room is from the time Mark tried to fix a leaky pipe himself and ended up flooding the entire second floor. We laughed so hard we cried that day, mopping up water with beach towels at 2 a.m. This house wasn't just wood and drywall, it was the physical manifestation of our partnership. And the ring was the cornerstone of it all. It wasn't some flashy, store-bought diamond. It was my grandmother's. A beautiful, intricate Art Deco piece with a center stone the color of pale champagne, surrounded by a halo of smaller, brilliant-cut diamonds. My grandfather had it custom-made for her in the 1930s. When she gave it to me, her hand trembling with age, she'd cupped my face and said, "This isn't just a ring, Amelia. It's a promise. It's seen 70 years of love, of hardship, of forgiveness. It's strong. Make sure your love is just as strong." When Mark asked my mother for my hand, he didn't present a ring of his own. He humbly asked for the honor of placing my grandmother's ring on my finger. He understood its significance. He revered it, or so I thought. He would sometimes take my hand, his thumb tracing the delicate filigree on the band. "This is everything," he'd say. "This is generations of love, all leading to us." The words were beautiful. I now know they were also hollow. The change was subtle at first, a tiny shift in the foundation you could almost convince yourself you were imagining. He started working late more often. Big project at the firm, he'd say, kissing my forehead as he rushed out the door, his phone already pressed to his ear. The calls would come at all hours, and he'd take them in the other room, his voice a low, urgent murmur. When I'd ask who it was, he'd wave a dismissive hand. Just work, honey. You know how Henderson gets. I did know. Henderson was his boss, a notorious micromanager. It was a plausible lie, and I wanted so badly to believe it. So I did. I'd make him a late dinner, keeping it warm in the oven, and more often than not, I'd eat alone, the silence of our big kitchen pressing in on me. Gus would rest his head on my lap, his big brown eyes full of a sad wisdom, as if he knew something I didn't. Then came the little cruelties, small as paper cuts, but they bled all the same. He started making comments about my appearance. "Are you really wearing that?" he'd ask, a slight wrinkle in his nose as I came downstairs in my favorite cozy sweater. Or, "You should really get back to the gym, Ames. You've let yourself go a bit." Each comment was a small, calculated chip at my self-esteem. I, who had always been confident, started second-guessing every outfit, scrutinizing my reflection in the mirror for new lines and flaws he might notice. The man who used to tell me I was beautiful first thing in the morning, my hair a mess and sleep in my eyes, now looked at me with a cool, critical distance. The warmth in his eyes when he looked at me was gone, replaced by something that looked unnervingly like impatience. Or worse, boredom. We stopped talking. Really talking. Our conversations became a series of logistical exchanges. Who was picking up the dry cleaning? Did I remember to pay the electric bill? The easy intimacy we'd shared, the late-night conversations where we'd solve the world's problems from the comfort of our bed, vanished. It was replaced by a tense, brittle silence, filled only by the sound of the television or the clicking of his keyboard as he worked on his laptop, a wall of technology between us. I tried to bridge the gap. I'd plan date nights, buy tickets to a concert for the band we both loved, suggest a weekend away to the cabin where we'd spent our honeymoon. He was always too busy, too tired. "Maybe next month, Ames," he'd say, not even looking up from his screen. Next month never came. I felt like I was living with a ghost, a polite, handsome stranger who inhabited my husband's body. The loneliness was a physical ache in my chest, a constant companion in the house we had built together. The house that was supposed to be filled with love and laughter was now a museum of a life I used to have. And I was its lonely, bewildered curator, wandering through the quiet rooms, trying to figure out where it all went wrong. The inciting incident, the moment the world shattered, wasn't a dramatic confrontation. It was a Tuesday morning, gray and drizzling, the kind of day that already feels defeated. Mark had left early for a breakfast meeting. I was gathering the laundry, a mundane task for a life that was about to become anything but. His gym bag was on the floor by his side of the bed, unzipped. He never left it unzipped. He was meticulous, almost pathologically neat. A flash of white caught my eye, tucked into the side pocket. A receipt. My hand trembled as I pulled it out. It wasn't from a client breakfast. It was from a hotel. The kind of boutique hotel with champagne bars and ridiculously expensive suites that people go to when they don't want to be found. But that wasn't the worst part. The charge was for 2 nights. The previous Friday and Saturday. The weekend he was supposedly on a company retreat in the mountains, where there was no cell service. I remembered my frantic, unanswered calls. My worry that something had happened. He'd come home Sunday night, smelling of pine and feigned exhaustion, telling me stories of trust falls and team-building exercises. I sank down onto the edge of the bed, the flimsy piece of paper feeling as heavy as a tombstone in my hand. The room spun. Every lie, every late night, every dismissive comment clicked into place like a series of locks, and the door to a horrible, undeniable truth swung open. He wasn't just distant. He wasn't just stressed. He was living a double life. And I had been the fool who kept his dinner warm. My first instinct was pure, unadulterated rage. I wanted to smash things. I wanted to take that receipt and tape it to the front door for the whole world to see. I wanted to scream until my lungs burned. But then, just as quickly, The rage was extinguished by a tidal wave of grief so profound it stole the air from my body. I curled into a ball on the bed, clutching the receipt to my chest, and I sobbed. I cried for the boy I'd met in college, the one with the easy laugh and the dreams in his eyes. I cried for the man who held my hand while I was in labor with a puppy because I was that scared. I cried for the life I thought we had, the future he'd painted so vividly, now dissolving into a cruel mirage. Gus, sensing my distress, padded over and rested his heavy head on my knees, whining softly. His solid, warm presence was the only thing that kept me from completely shattering into a million pieces. I decided to confront him that night. I spent the day in a daze, rehearsing what I would say, my heart alternating between a cold, hard knot of fury and a quivering mess of pain. I set the receipt on the kitchen island, a silent, damning piece of evidence. When he walked in, he was all smiles, whistling a cheerful tune. He leaned in to kiss me, and I flinched away as if from a hot iron. His smile faltered. "What's wrong?" he asked, the picture of concerned innocence. I just pointed to the receipt. I watched his face as he read it. It was a masterclass in microexpressions. A flicker of panic, quickly masked by confusion, then settling into a practiced look of weary indignation. "Ames, what is this? You were going through my things." The gaslighting began immediately. He turned it on me. My invasion of his privacy. My lack of trust. "You were supposed to be in the mountains, Mark," I said, my voice shaking but steady. "You told me there was no cell service," he sighed, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. "It's a work thing. A client meeting ran late. Henderson booked us rooms to stay over." "It's not what you think." He tried to take my hands, to pull me into his familiar, comforting embrace that had always been my undoing. This time, I stood my ground.
À Boutique Hotel?
"For a corporate meeting?" "For 2 nights." I pressed. "Who was with you, Mark?" His eyes turned cold. The mask of the loving husband slipped, and for a second, I saw the stranger beneath. "This is ridiculous, Amelia. I'm not going to be interrogated in my own home."
I'm exhausted.
"I've been working my tail off for this family, and I come home to this? To accusations and suspicion? Maybe if you put as much effort into us as you do into your paranoia, we wouldn't be having this conversation." He brushed past me, leaving the receipt on the counter, and went upstairs. I heard the shower turn on, washing away the scent of her, washing away his lies. I stood alone in the kitchen, the silence ringing in my ears. He hadn't just lied. He had twisted the knife, making me the villain in a story of his own creation. That night, I didn't sleep in our bed. I slept on the sofa downstairs, with Gus curled at my feet, my silent, loyal guard. The war had begun, and I had just lost the first battle. I felt small, powerless, and utterly, devastatingly alone. The weeks that followed were a slow-motion nightmare. Mark acted as if our conversation had never happened. He was either cloyingly sweet, bringing me flowers and suggesting dinner at my favorite restaurant, or he was cold and distant, treating me like an inconvenient piece of furniture. It was emotional whiplash. I was constantly on edge, walking on eggshells in my own home. I felt like I was going crazy, questioning my own sanity. He was so convincing, so calm, that I started to wonder if I had overreacted. Maybe it really was a misunderstanding. But then little things would happen that would pull the scab off the wound. A credit card bill arrived with a charge for a ridiculously expensive dinner at a restaurant I'd never been to. When I asked, he'd say, "Client dinner, Ames." You know how it is. Another time, I found a single, long blonde hair on the passenger seat of his car. "My hair is dark brown. Must be from someone at the office. I gave Linda from accounting a ride the other day," he'd explained, without missing a beat. He had an answer for everything. A smooth, plausible lie for every piece of damning evidence. The Mistress, a faceless, nameless entity I'd begun to call Blondie in my head, started to make her presence felt. It was subtle, psychological warfare. A hang-up call when I answered the phone. An anonymous flower delivery to my office with no card. Little things designed to unravel me, to make me feel watched and insecure. I knew it was her. I couldn't prove it, but I felt it in my bones. Mark, of course, dismissed my fears. You're being paranoid, Amelia. It's probably just a wrong number. You need to relax. He made me feel like the crazy, jealous wife from a bad movie. He was poisoning the well, making me question my own perceptions of reality. I started losing weight. I couldn't sleep. My friends noticed the dark circles under my eyes, my nervous energy. Is everything okay with you and Mark? My best friend, Sarah, asked over coffee one afternoon. I wanted to tell her everything, to unload the toxic weight I was carrying, but the shame kept me silent. How could I admit that the perfect marriage everyone envied was a lie? How could I admit that my husband, the man I'd given my life to, was systematically dismantling my sanity? So I just smiled a watery smile and said, "We're fine. Just stressed with work." The lie tasted like ash in my mouth. The house, once my sanctuary, began to feel like a prison. Every room held a memory that was now tainted. The kitchen where we'd danced while cooking pasta was now the room where he'd lied to my face. The bedroom where we'd shared our deepest secrets was now just a room where he slept before going to her. I felt like a ghost in my own life, watching a man I didn't know go through the motions of being my husband. The lowest point came one evening about a month after I'd found the receipt. Mark was in one of his cold moods. He'd barely said 2 words to me all night. I was trying to read a book on the sofa, but the words just swam in front of my eyes. He was on his laptop, and a small, satisfied smile played on his lips as he typed. I knew he was talking to her. The thought was a physical pain. I finally broke the silence. "Mark, we need to talk. We can't go on like this." He didn't look up. "I'm busy, Amelia." "No," I said, my voice stronger than I expected. "We're talking now." He snapped his laptop shut with a loud, aggressive click. His eyes were flinty. "What is there to talk about?" "The fact that you've become this suspicious, nagging woman I don't even recognize anymore." "I don't recognize you either," I shot back, tears stinging my eyes. The Mark I married wouldn't lie to me. He wouldn't treat me like this. He stood up and loomed over me. His voice was dangerously quiet. "Let me be very clear. You can either accept that I have a demanding job and a stressful life, and be the supportive wife you're supposed to be, or you can keep this up and see where it gets you. But I promise you, Amelia, you won't like it." It wasn't just a threat. It was a promise. He was telling me to shut up and accept his affair, or he would destroy me. He saw the flicker of fear in my eyes and seemed to soften, mistaking it for submission. He sighed dramatically. "Look, I'm sorry. I'm just stressed. Let's not fight." He reached out to touch my arm, and I recoiled. That was it. The last thread of hope I'd been clinging to, the naive belief that we could fix this, finally snapped. I wasn't just fighting for my marriage anymore. I was fighting for myself. And I was done being the victim. That night, as I lay on the sofa, listening to the sound of his steady breathing from the room upstairs, something inside me shifted. The grief and the fear didn't disappear, but they were joined by something new. A cold, quiet, calculating anger. He thought I was weak. He thought I would break. He was about to find out just how wrong he was. The shift wasn't a sudden, dramatic explosion. It was a slow crystallization. The tears dried up, and in their place, a diamond-hard resolve began to form. I spent days in a quiet fog of my own, my mind a whirlwind of plans and possibilities. He thought my silence was acceptance. He mistook my stillness for surrender. But I wasn't surrendering. I was reloading. The catalyst for my plan came on a Sunday afternoon. Mark was on the phone in his study, the door slightly ajar. I heard him laughing, a light, carefree sound I hadn't heard directed at me in years. And then I heard him say it. "Don't worry, baby. The ring is practically yours anyway. It's worth a fortune. Think of it as our nest egg. She doesn't deserve something that beautiful. She doesn't appreciate it." The words hit me with the force of a physical blow. The ring. My grandmother's ring. The symbol of 70 years of love, of my family's history, of the promise he had made to me. To him, it was just an asset. A nest egg. Something to be liquidated to fund his new life with his mistress. He wasn't just betraying me. He was trying to steal my heritage. That was the moment the heartbroken wife died, and a strategist was born. He had underestimated me. He saw me as Amelia, the gentle, art history-loving wife who organized charity galas and tended her garden. He had forgotten that before I was his wife, I was the daughter of a prosecutor and the granddaughter of a woman who survived a war. Resilience was in my blood, and so was a finely tuned sense of justice. My plan started to take shape, intricate and precise. It couldn't be a messy, emotional confrontation. That's what he would expect. No, this had to be a work of art. A perfectly executed masterpiece of revenge that would dismantle his world with the cool precision of a surgeon. The first step was research. I spent hours at the library, using their public computers, learning about high-quality cubic zirconia, moissanite, and lab-grown diamonds. I studied the art of replication, the subtle details that separate a cheap knockoff from a convincing fake. I learned about appraisals, about the legalities of marital assets, about private investigators. I was a student again, and my subject was the complete and total annihilation of Mark's arrogance. The second and most crucial step was finding the right jeweler. I couldn't go to our usual family jeweler. I needed someone discreet, an artist with questionable ethics, but unquestionable skill. I found him through a series of hushed referrals in a part of the city I rarely visited. His name was Anton, a gruff, elderly Russian man with eyes that had seen everything and judged nothing. His shop was small and cluttered, smelling of metal polish and secrets. I brought him my ring. I'll never forget the feeling of sliding it off my finger and placing it on his velvet tray. It felt like a betrayal in itself. My hand was suddenly light, naked. Anton picked it up with a pair of tweezers, his eye loop screwed into his socket. He whistled low. "Old-world craftsmanship," he grunted. "Beautiful. Why you want to copy this masterpiece with glass?" I looked him straight in the eye, my voice devoid of emotion. "My husband is planning on stealing it to give to his mistress. I would like the original to remain with its rightful owner, a flicker of something. Was it respect?" Crossed his face. He nodded slowly. "A worthy cause." For the next 2 weeks, I lived on a knife's edge of anxiety. I'd make excuses to leave the house for my appointments with Anton. I told Mark I'd joined a new yoga studio across town. He barely registered it, too absorbed in his own secret life to pay much attention to mine. Anton was a genius. He created a replica that was, to the naked eye, perfect. He matched the unique champagne color of the center stone, the precise cut of the surrounding diamonds, the intricate filigree of the platinum band. He even replicated a tiny, almost invisible scratch on the inside of the band that only I knew was there. The only difference was the weight. The replica was infinitesimally lighter, and, of course, the value. The replica was worth a few $100s. The original was priceless to me, and worth a small fortune to him. The day I went to pick it up, my heart was hammering against my ribs. Anton placed the 2 rings side by side on the velvet tray. They were identical. Indistinguishable. "Which is which?" he asked, a rare, small smile playing on his lips. I pointed to the one on the right. "My ring." I could feel its history, its warmth. He nodded. "You have a good eye. And good courage." I paid him in cash, the thick wad of bills feeling illicit and powerful in my hand. It was money I had quietly siphoned from a personal savings account I'd had since before I was married. My escape fund. My mother had called it. I never thought I'd need it for something like this. The hardest part was the swap. I had to wait for the perfect opportunity. It came a few days later. Mark announced he was going for a run. I knew he was really going to meet her. As soon as I heard his car pull out of the driveway, I raced upstairs. My hands were shaking so violently, I could barely open the jewelry box. I lifted the real ring, my grandmother's ring, and slipped it onto my finger. It felt like coming home. The weight, the familiar coolness of the metal.
It was a part of me.
I then placed the cold, soulless replica into the velvet slot where my heritage used to sit. I closed the lid and took a deep, shuddering breath. The trap was set. Now, all I had to do was wait for the rat to take the bait. Every day was a new form of torture, watching that box, waiting. The waiting was the worst part. Every day felt like a year. I'd watch him get ready in the morning, watch him look in the mirror, adjusting his tie, completely oblivious to the web I was weaving around him. I'd see him glance at my hand, see my grandmother's rings sparkling there, and I'd have to fight the urge to smile. He had no idea he was looking at the real one. He assumed I was wearing it as I always did. The fake sat in the jewelry box, a ticking time bomb. I was on high alert constantly. Every time he went near my side of the room, my muscles would tense. I felt like a spy in my own home, my own life. I was playing a dangerous game, and the stakes were my entire future. The night he took it, I knew it was going to happen. There was a different energy about him. A nervous, excited tremor under his skin. He told me he had to go into the office, that a huge deal was closing and they had to work through the night. It was the most pathetic lie he'd ever told. He was practically vibrating with anticipation. He kissed me goodbye at the door, a quick, dry peck on the cheek. His eyes didn't meet mine. "Don't wait up," he said, his voice a little too bright. I just nodded, my face a carefully constructed mask of weary acceptance. "Okay, dear. Be safe." The moment the door closed behind him, I sagged against it, my heart pounding a frantic, painful rhythm. I knew where he was going. He was going to her. And he was taking my bait with him. I waited for 10 minutes, my ears straining for the sound of his car returning, my mind racing with the possibility that he'd somehow figured it out. But there was only silence. With a deep breath, I walked up the stairs to our bedroom. The air was still and heavy. I walked over to my jewelry box, my feet feeling like lead. My hand trembled as I reached for the lid. I lifted it. It was gone. The velvet indentation was empty. The replica was gone. He had done it. He had actually walked into our room, opened my personal things, and stolen what he believed was my most precious possession to give to another woman. Even though I had planned it, even though this was exactly what I wanted to happen, the reality of it was a punch to the gut. The sheer, unmitigated audacity of his betrayal left me breathless. It wasn't about the monetary value. It was the violation. The absolute desecration of everything our marriage was supposed to represent. For a moment, all the cold resolve, all the strategic anger, evaporated. I collapsed onto the floor, my back against the bed, and a single, hot tear traced a path down my cheek. The strategist was gone, and in her place was just Amelia, a woman whose husband had just ripped her heart out and handed it to someone else. I felt a surge of doubt. What was I doing? This complicated, risky plan, was it worth it? Maybe I should have just confronted him, screamed at him, thrown him out. A clean break. But I knew that wouldn't work. He would twist it, lie his way out of it, paint me as the hysterical, unstable wife. He would take me to the cleaners in the divorce, using his high-powered lawyer friends.
No.
My way was better. My way was the only way to ensure he couldn't lie his way out. It was the only way to expose him for exactly who he was, not just to me but to the world. And to her. I took a shuddering breath and pushed myself up from the floor. I walked to my closet and pulled out a small, locked safe from the back corner. I opened it and took out the real ring. I slipped it on my finger. The familiar weight was an anchor in the storm of my emotions. He thought he had my grandmother's ring. He thought he had the nest egg. He had a worthless piece of glass. And he was about to hand-deliver his own destruction. The game was in its final act, and I was holding all the cards. The climax of my plan required one final, delicate piece of orchestration. I needed them, Mark and his mistress, whose name I had finally learned was Chloe, at a specific place at a specific time. And I needed an audience. A professional, unimpeachable audience. A few days after Mark stole the replica, I used a burner phone to send an anonymous email. It was addressed to Chloe, sent to the generic info account of the boutique PR firm where she worked. I'd had her investigated. I knew everything. The subject line was simple. An opportunity. The email was brief and enticing. It hinted that a wealthy, anonymous benefactor was looking to invest in a promising young publicist. The benefactor's representative, a Mr. Alastair Finch, a name I'd plucked from a Dickens novel, would be available to meet at one specific time, at one specific location, the appraisal office of one of the most respected gemologists in the city, Mr. Harrison. The email suggested that bringing a significant item of personal value for a complimentary appraisal would be a sign of her good faith and ambition. It was a long shot, a ridiculous, almost theatrical setup. But I was banking on two things: Chloe's greed and her insecurity. A woman having an affair with a married man, banking on his wife's heirloom ring as her nest egg, was not a woman secure in her position. She would be desperate to legitimize her claim, to turn the symbol of his betrayal into cold, hard cash. I had, of course, already spoken to Mr. Harrison. He was a friend of my father's, a man of impeccable integrity and discretion. I had told him a carefully edited version of the story, that I suspected my husband was about to be the victim of a scam involving a fraudulent copy of a family heirloom. I asked him if he would be willing to perform an appraisal and to be brutally, unequivocally honest in his assessment, no matter who was in the room. He had looked at me over his spectacles, his eyes kind but shrewd. "Amelia," he'd said, his voice a gravelly baritone, "for your father, and for the sake of the truth, I will do it. Just tell me when." I gave him the day and time. I told him a young woman named Chloe and possibly a man named Mark would be coming in. He simply nodded. The trap was not just set anymore, it was baited and armed. The day of the appointment, I was a wreck of nerves and icy calm. I dressed carefully in a simple, elegant navy blue dress. I wore my grandmother's ring. It felt like armor. I didn't go to Mr. Harrison's office. That would be too obvious. Instead, I sat in a small cafe across the street, a place with a large plate glass window that offered a perfect, unobstructed view of the entrance to his building. I ordered a chamomile tea, my hands wrapped around the warm mug, though I felt anything but calm. I felt like a general on a hill, watching the battle unfold below. Then I saw them. Mark's sleek black car pulled up to the curb. He got out of the driver's side, looking smug and triumphant in his expensive suit. Then he opened the passenger door, and she emerged.
Chloe.
She was exactly what I had pictured. Young, blonde, beautiful in a sharp, hungry way. She was wearing a dress that was a little too tight, a little too bright. She looked like a woman who was trying very hard to look like she belonged. She held on to Mark's arm, a triumphant smile on her face. And on the third finger of her left hand, catching the afternoon sun, was the fake ring. My fake ring. They looked so proud, so confident, like a king and queen arriving at their coronation. They had no idea they were walking into their own execution. I watched them disappear into the building. The next 15 minutes were the longest of my life. I just sat there, staring at the door, my tea growing cold. My mind raced with everything that could go wrong. What if she didn't go through with it? What if Mark got spooked? What if Mr. Harrison had a last-minute change of heart? I forced myself to take slow, deep breaths. I had done everything I could. The rest was in the hands of fate and their own monumental greed. And then the show began. Even from across the street, I could feel the shift. The glass doors of the building flew open, and Chloe stumbled out, her face a mask of furious, tear-streaked disbelief. Mark was right behind her, his face pale and slack-jawed with shock. They were shouting at each other. Chloe's voice was a shrill, piercing shriek that carried across the street. "Worthless? What do you mean it's worthless? You told me it was a fortune." Mark was trying to placate her, grabbing her arm, his voice a low, desperate rumble. "There must be a mistake, baby. He must be wrong. The only mistake was me believing you," she screamed, wrenching her arm away. She ripped the ring off her finger and threw it at him. It bounced off his chest and clattered onto the pavement, a pathetic, tinny sound. "He said the real one is still with your wife." "Your wife?" That was my cue. I stood up, leaving a $20 bill on the table. I walked out of the cafe and started across the street, my steps slow, deliberate, measured. They were so engrossed in their spectacular, public implosion that they didn't see me coming until I was standing right in front of them. I stopped a few feet away, my hands clasped loosely in front of me. I raised my left hand slightly, letting the afternoon sun catch the facets of the real diamond, my grandmother's diamond. It threw off sparks of brilliant, fiery light. Mark's eyes locked onto it. The blood drained from his face. He looked from the ring on my finger to the cheap replica lying on the dirty sidewalk, and in that instant, the entire, elaborate deception crashed down on him. He understood. He finally truly understood. Chloe followed his gaze. Her jaw dropped. The fury on her face curdled into a look of utter, complete humiliation. She looked at me, at the real ring, at the woman she had tried to replace, and she saw not a victim, but the architect of her downfall. I didn't say a word. I didn't have to. I just looked at Mark, my expression calm, my eyes holding his. I let the silence stretch, thick with his ruin. I had won. Not just the ring, but my life, my dignity, my power. It wasn't a loud, screaming victory. It was quiet. It was absolute. And it was devastatingly, beautifully complete. The aftermath was a cascade of consequences, all triggered by that single, spectacular moment on the sidewalk. Mark tried to speak, his mouth opening and closing like a fish, but no sound came out. He was utterly broken. The smug, confident man I knew completely erased, replaced by a hollow-eyed stranger. Chloe shot one last look at him, a look of pure, unadulterated contempt, and then she stormed off, clicking down the street in her two high heels without a backward glance. She was a mercenary who had just discovered her treasure map was a fake. Her investment had yielded nothing. Mark just stood there, staring at me, the wreckage of his life scattered around him on a public street. I finally broke the silence. My voice was calm and steady. I'll have my lawyer contact yours, Mark. I turned and walked away. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I could feel the weight of his stare on my back, the crushing gravity of his defeat. The divorce was surprisingly swift. My little stunt at the appraiser's office had given me all the leverage I needed. When my lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Ms. Davies, laid out the evidence, the hotel receipt, the credit card statements, and the sworn affidavit from Mr. Harrison detailing Mark's attempt to have a stolen, fraudulent item appraised, Mark's legal team practically tripped over themselves to settle. He had committed blatant marital fraud, attempting to steal a significant asset that was legally designated as my personal, inherited property. He had no defense. He tried to fight it at first, of course. He tried to claim I had set him up, that I was mentally unstable. But the evidence was cold, hard, and undeniable. His affair was exposed, not just as a moral failing, but as a calculated financial crime. He lost big. He lost the house we built together, the house he had defiled with his lies. The judge awarded it to me, along with a significant portion of his assets, as punitive damages for his fraudulent behavior. He lost his reputation. The story, in all its juicy, humiliating detail, somehow got leaked to the local business journal. The story of the high-powered executive who tried to pawn off a fake ring on his mistress was just too good not to tell. His firm, embarrassed by the scandal, quietly forced his resignation. The man who had defined himself by his success, his power, his image, had lost it all. I spent the next few months rebuilding. I had the locks changed. I hired painters and had the entire house repainted in shades of cream and soft blue, erasing the drab beiges Mark had insisted on. I purged every last trace of him from the closets, the drawers, the garage. It was a cleansing, a reclamation of my space. Sarah and my other friends, to whom I had finally confessed everything, rallied around me. They helped me pack his things into boxes, turning what could have been a painful task into an evening of wine, pizza, and therapeutic laughter. Selling the house crossed my mind. It held so many tainted memories. But then, as I stood in the living room, the afternoon sun streaming through the newly cleaned windows, with Gus snoring softly on the new rug, I realized something. The house wasn't his. It was mine. I had dreamed it up just as much as he had. My love and my work were, in its very foundations. The bad memories weren't in the walls. They were in my head. and I could choose to make new ones. So I stayed. I planted a new garden, filled with hydrangeas and lavender. I turned his old study into my own personal library, lining the walls with books from floor to ceiling. I reclaimed my home, piece by piece. As for the ring, it sits in the safe in my closet. I don't wear it anymore. For a while, looking at it brought a pang of sadness for the love I thought it represented. But over time, that feeling has faded. Now, when I look at it, I don't see Mark's betrayal. I see my grandmother's strength. I see the 70 years of love it witnessed before it ever came to me. And I see my own resilience. I see the woman who refused to be a victim, the woman who took back her power with intelligence and grace. It's no longer a symbol of a broken promise. It's a symbol of my survival, a reminder that I am stronger than I ever thought possible. Life is quiet now, but it's a good quiet. It's the peaceful, contented silence of a life lived on my own terms. It's the sound of Gus's happy sighs, the rustle of leaves in the oak tree outside my window, the gentle hum of a house that is finally, truly a home again. I am not the same woman I was a year ago. She was naive, trusting, and a little bit fragile. The woman I am now is warier, yes, but she is also wiser, stronger, and fiercely protective of her own peace. Mark tried to steal my future, but in the end, he only succeeded in giving me a new one. A better one. One that is entirely my own. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever had to find the strength to rebuild after a betrayal, I'd be honored if you subscribed and joined our community here. Your presence means the world. Thanks for being here with me today.